All right, today this is a little bit of some of the terms you should be familiar with, but it just talks about if you guys are going to do a franchise, how much are you going to charge for it? And one of the things, who's doing the, or thought about doing the Jamaican restaurant? Was that you guys? What did you tell me the franchise fee was, and they refund part of it back to you? Okay. Why do you think a company would charge $25,000 and then refund $15,000 after the first year?
Insurance policy.
I mean, it's kind of, that's one of those deals. Why are they charging that little, which 25 in today's market, you know, depending on what the industry is, that's not a lot of money. But then they're going to hand part of it back is because it's a very young franchise and there's not a whole lot of value in the brand name. And that's what you got to look out for. Well, yeah, this is cheap to get into. And same thing, all the yogurt concepts, all the little one-stop mom-and-pop type stuff, how much money can you make? And you can't charge people a lot of money for a franchise fee and for royalties if they can't make a lot of money. I mean, that is an expense that they're going to be contributing to every month. So you charge too much, they're not going to join. If like that Panera Bread, you know, you had to have a net worth of $7.5 million, well, that's going to exclude a lot of potential franchisees. If you don't charge enough, you're leaving money on the table, so you got to try to get that fit that's what's affordable for the franchisee, but yet what's going to be profitable for us to be able to support them. Okay, so franchise fee and royalty rate. So the franchise fee, one time up front, average is about $32,000, and most of the your high-end stuff, your motels, your fast food, the major fast foods now are all up in the $40,000 range at least. What brings the average down to 32 is you have the yogurts and a lot of the startups that can't justify charging a large franchise fee just because their brand names doesn't have that value. Lodging 35 too. This is up some. This is a little bit dated. The lodging's up around 40, and I know the fast food is around 35 to 40 now. Also, all your major ones are. The problem with all your major fast foods now, they're almost impossible to get. McDonald's is really doing very little to solicit new franchisees. Same with Wendy's. They're growing internally and getting existing franchisees. So they're almost really, and think about Wendy's, McDonald's, where could you put another one if there's not one already close? Although I still am shocked that the Wendy's right across from campus, that was a great location, and not sure why that went out. Unless, you know, it could have been they were going to have to majorly overhaul that building because it was old, and they just didn't want to spend the money. And that happens too. Wendy's could have come in and said, and McDonald's out on Thomasville Road, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, they leveled that building, and it was, I mean, I've been stopping at it when I was in college. It was probably 40 years old. They came in and leveled it and built a total new building. Okay, but remember our McDonald's scenario, they provide most of the cost of the building, and then they just charge you rent, so they can afford to do that. Versus a franchisee, when Wendy says, you're going to have to come in and totally remodel, so this guy's looking at it, do I want to spend $500,000 to keep this one location open? All right, these are just some sample. The Pac Mill and UPS store, those are, once again, you would have to do a lot of research into those to see. I'm not sure how much money you could make in those. And you know what? I know the guy from Pac Mill, from UPS store. I might be able to get him to come in. That'd be interesting. All right, so franchise fee. Here's the things you got to consider. Your brand name. The more valuable your brand name, McDonald's, Wendy's, they're going to get a premium just because their brand name is worth so much. Outlet profit margins. Once again, even though TCBY is a very, very good brand name, I think most of you guys have heard of that, they still can't charge a lot because the profit margins in the yogurt business are just not that high. You can't serve that many customers. You have a limited customer base, so it's just not something you can generate a whole lot of money with. Industry norms, what does the industry and the sub-industry is good? It's all going to be probably about the same. Size and age of the chain. And once again, they'll tell you as you get more mature, as you get more stores, then you should be able to raise your rate as it goes. Size of the territory you receive. Some cases you might have to buy a territory, and they might charge you X per store, and then if you add additional stores, they might give you a little discount if you buy an area. cost, type, and extent of the services provided. What kind of support are you going to get? Are they going to have ongoing field support? Do you have technical backup from theirs, or do you have to outsource that? And then the length of the contract. The longer the contract, usually the more you can charge, because that, as we saw with the renewals, most of the renewals you had to repay pretty much that franchise fee again, or a percentage of it for whatever your renewal period was. So if you get a 20-year deal and you pay that one time, then you're good for 20 years. So you can charge a little bit more if you have that longer-term contract. But also remember, the kind of the downside of that long-term contract is you're locked in for 20 years and you can't make changes to the royalty rate if you wanted to or needed to. All right, so you should go up over time. Inflation, everything costs more. Increased services, not necessarily. I don't think. Pretty much that service level is going to stay the same, and especially for people who are doing repeat business, once again, that franchisor is less valuable, because once you've done it once, you really don't need as much help for the second, third, and fourth time. Increases tend to be modest, so it's crucial to charge it off at the beginning. So you want to try to set that rate very competitive at the beginning. And the one thing that is very, I think, applicable is that your brand name becomes more valuable. All right, so franchise fee represents on average about 8% what they would pay to the franchisor over the life. So that's pretty significant, a little less than 10%. Make sure that the franchisor will support the brand, and it prevents the franchisor from routinely terminating agreements. And once again, they can't terminate your agreement without cause. And then most franchisees have limited capital, so if you're charging them that big part up front, especially if you think about it, if in my case I had to go in and buy land, build a building, do pavement, do all that stuff, then pay that franchise fee on top of that, that's a large outlay up front. If you're leasing, it's really not as big of a deal. All right, so franchise fees are shaped by a number of factors. The higher the franchisee, the harder it is to track franchises. But once again, to me, that's a relative term. If your brand is worth charging more and people want to get that brand, do you think anybody blinks at $40,000 for a McDonald's? Why not? You're going to do $2.5 million in sales in any kind of decent location, and you're going to make that money back. So it just really depends on the value of your brand. All right, so royalty rate. That's our ongoing collection. That is a percentage of sales from franchisees. Sales are easy to monitor than profits, and that's one of the things you guys have asked about. Well, why don't they take it on profits? Well, because profits is a manageable number and something that you can manipulate. You can run, a lot of people run expenses through the business, charge your phone and all that. So even though that's not profit, it's considered positive cash flow to you. So it's easier to do on just gross sales. That's something that should not be able to be messed with a whole lot. But only 5% charge a flat royalty, 95% charge based on percentage of sales. And we talked about, I think we've already talked about that, the advantages and disadvantages. If you charge a flat fee, that is proportionally not good for people who don't do a lot of sales, and it's really great for the people who do a lot of sales. So the most equitable way is to just charge people on sales. About 1/3 of franchisors charge between 4 and 5%. I would say 4 and 8 is probably your range right now. 6 is probably the good median that I know Firehouse, Dunkin' Donuts, all those are in that 6 range. 4 is at the low end, and very few really get past 8%. That's pretty high royalty, and we'll do some math in a second. All right, and so rule of thumb, the royalty should be less than 1/3 of your franchisee's profits. Okay, so let's figure this out or do an equation. Somebody got a calculator? All right. If I did at Hardee's, my royalty rate was 4%. So my gross sales were, if I did $1 million, which I did that in my first calendar year, then my royalty rate would have been $40,000, right? So what their rule of thumb, what they're saying is that $40,000 should be less than 1/3 of my franchise profit. So how much profit would I have needed to make to justify their formula? 120, okay? I was making about 160 per store. So in that case, I'm not going to have qualms about paying them $40,000 if I'm making 160. If I'm paying them 40 and I'm making 60 at the end of the day, Does that work out? You couldn't quit. You might try to sell your unit, but you wouldn't find anybody to buy it on that margin. So that royalty rate has to be, and think about these yogurt shops and all. Let's just do the math on this. If it's a 6% royalty and they're doing $500,000 worth of business, $30,000. Okay, you guys think those like TCBY are making $100,000 a year in profit? I don't know.
They gotta make a lot because it's so cheap to make ice cream.
Yeah, well, your labor cost is really low too because there's never more than like 1 or 2 people in there. The problem is your overhead. Those if you get mall places and the rent on buildings, a couple $1,000s a month, that's a lot just to cover your fixed costs, your utilities. Don't forget your advertising fee comes out also, and that's another payment to the franchisor that's not even included in this. The advertising fee is going to be another generally 4% or so that you're paying on top of that. So think about that. With the 4% I paid, the $40,000 in royalties, I also paid $40,000 in advertising to them also. So you've got to be able to generate enough profit, or if it's not, it's just not worth you investing in a franchise. All right, there's just some typical. Why do you think Geeks on Call? What is that? That's like a computer service. Why do you think they're able to charge such a high royalty rate? 11%. I'm paying 4.
Maybe because like such costs are down because if it's a professional service, they have cost of goods sold.
Okay. Are there any cost of goods sold? What's the only cost really in that? Labor, right? So what do you think the margins on Geeks on Call is? Yeah, how much do they charge an hour, you think?
$22.50.
Is that it?
Yeah.
That's really pretty reasonable.
I just made that up. No, it's pretty high.
I'm guessing it's around $50 an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't take your computer in to get it looked at for less than $100.
Yeah.
And so if they come to you, but their rate with very low overhead, because really you just have your car expense, and if you use any parts, then what do they do with those? They bill it out. They charge you parts plus labor. So their labor rate is all margin. So they can charge 11% because the margins in that business are very, very high versus some of the others where the margins aren't high. You can't get that big royalty rate. All right, so royalties account for over 90% of the funds collected from franchisees. So basically the franchise, the upfront payment is about 10%, and then royalties are 90% over the life of the contract. Parts should be treated as profit. Parts should be reinvested in the business. And there's a little story in the book. You guys don't have it, but it said McDonald's spent $3 million in the 60s to perfect their French fry design and everything, which, I mean, was a heck of an investment. What are they charging for McDonald's fries now? Is it? It's $2. Okay, and you know what one of the lowest food cost items in that place is? French fries. It's potatoes. Okay, that is one of the cheapest things that you can buy. But you know that whole upsize thing, why they try to do that? Because that's almost all pure profit. There's very little incremental cost to them when they upsize from a small to a large, and they charge you 47 cents. Same with the soda. That's why they try to do that, because it's all profit, very low cost. But that's one of the things that the company has to do is reinvest into the business. New products, like Firehouse, the whole spaceship Coke thing, and Coke was a partner with them in that, but that's doing stuff that's going to help the franchisees grow the business. Product development, training, developing the brand name, and then also part of that money is spent on almost every place is going to have field service consultants, people that come around and kind of check up on you and help you if you need help. All right, so a variety of things also can influence how much you can charge. Once again, brand name, better the brand name, higher royalty rates you can charge. Profit margin, certainly one. Industry, size and age of the chain, territory. So if you look, that list is pretty much the same as what shapes the franchise fee. Cost type and extent of services provided, and then once again, length of the contracts. I would say length of the contract is less of a factor on royalty rates, just simply because you can amortize that fee. If it's a longer contract, you're a one-time upfront fee. That makes it less per year. The only thing with the contract, though, is the shorter the contract, they have the option of raising the royalty rate on you if your contract expires, if they've raised it industry-wide. All right, so other sources of revenue play a role. You can lease. McDonald's makes a lot of their money. They're as much of a real estate company as they are a fast food company. They lease the land to the franchisees. You might sell or lease equipment to the franchisees. I know Hardee's had an equipment division, and once again, I checked prices, and they were cheaper than anywhere else I checked because of their buying power. And also, most places will have their own food division. So once you get set up in something like this, you can have 2 or 3 different profit centers that feed into your main, whatever your main franchise is. Okay, so how often? Over half, right about half, collect monthly. And that weekly is getting more popular now. People are wanting their money up front, and I know Dunkin' Donuts electronically withdraws funds from your account at the end of the week. They're wired in with technology. It's changed everything. Yeah, they get your sales each day at the close of the day. It automatically.
I've seen it where like my boss will put in the order for like the like in order to get the truck the next week, and like Jackie, our manager, has gone in and changed it from her house, like the order, and he'll come back and everything's gone, and he was like, okay, so she can just change it from her house.
Yeah.
The order from his computer.
Yeah, but the home office is also tied into that also.
Yeah, I'm saying everything is just they're hooked into everything in the store. So
Yeah, and so I know the lady that from Dunkin' said that they just on every Friday their royalty gets deducted out. They have automatic draft that they get. I used to be able to just write a check at the end of the month. Okay, but once again, businesses are getting much more sophisticated now. You guys know the term opportunity cost of money. Okay, they're letting me keep that instead of letting me keep that money for a month, and I could pay that off on debt or whatever and reduce my interest expense. They're collecting it immediately. But you got to be careful that, and hopefully these franchises are successful enough that you ought to be able to pay your bill at the end of the week. I don't know that the end of the month is going to make any difference. You should, but you can't create cash flow problems for your franchisees. Don't charge high royalties if you can also earn margins on inputs sold to your franchisees. That's like the food or the equipment. Don't charge a high royalty rate if your brand is not well developed. People aren't going to pay it. And don't charge a high royalty rate if you're providing few services to franchisees. And it sounds like Quiznos too. It was like, oh yeah, we'd sign up and then you go pick a site, and there was very little help from corporate, which I got a lady that I think I told you came down and actually sat at intersections at 5 and 6 in the morning looking at traffic patterns, and she came back and said, okay, here's kind of where you want to be. All right, so the interaction of franchise fee and royalty rate both tend to be a little bit lower in young, small systems than in mature, large systems. They increase over time, and there were several factors for that. And then new systems tend to discount the franchise fee more than the royalty rate. Why do you think that is? Why would you discount the franchise fee versus a royalty rate? Okay, yeah, that franchise fee is a one-time thing. So if you charge $10,000 instead of $20 and get them on the hook, then you're getting that monthly cash flow that goes on and on and on.
Reduce the franchise fee in order to up the royalty rate? Do they do that, or?
I don't know that. I've never seen anybody do that. Now, the one thing that companies will do, and I was a beneficiary of that, I got a graduated royalty rate where the first year I only had to pay 1%, 2%, 3%. So they can do that as an incentive to get people going. And what that does is it frees up cash flow for that person during the first 3 years. So that's not a bad thing to do, but I never saw any fluctuation on the royalty rate.
Would you say your royalty rate went up so down?
Mine capped out at 4. But when I signed, they were looking, Hardee's was very desperately wanting franchisees in Arkansas. So I paid 1% the first year, 2% the second, 3% the third. Think about it. On that $1 million, I paid $10,000. So that was basically $30,000 extra, and that was one of the things. I mean, I can't say I wouldn't have done it if they didn't have that incentive, but think about it over 3 years. I saved $30,000 the first year, 20. So that's $60,000 I made over the first 3 years just in reduced royalty rate. That's, pretty significant. Hey, I went on and part of it, the advertising, I was looking. Anybody want to take a guess how much money McDonald's spends on advertising a year?
Where? Here?
Just corporate wide.
500 billion?
That's a little high.
2 trillion.
They,
250 million.
a little higher.
It's got to be 500 billion.
Higher.
750.
How about $963 million? Okay, now divide that by 365 days. Okay, $963 million. 2.63 million dollars a day McDonald's spends in advertising. So, yeah. Okay, and I don't know how extensive their advertising is, like in the international markets and kind of what you do to advertise over there. But think about part of that is they are huge billboard people. Okay, so that's an ongoing, and the billboards aren't cheap. Maybe $300, $400, $500 a month times however many they have. But think about TV commercials. How often do you go a day without, if you watch TV, seeing McDonald's on TV? Yeah, $2.5 million a day they spend in advertising. But what allows them to do that? They have so many stores contributing into that fund, and that's the whole economies of scale thing. Once you get big, then you've got more people. And Hardee's was so small, we did 1% to national advertising because we didn't have the volume of stores to purchase that national. If you do go national, like Super Bowl ad or something, that is very, very expensive. Now, you reach a lot of people, but who thinks McDonald's could reduce their advertising down and stick some money in their pocket and it wouldn't hurt them? See, I don't know. I would try that probably.
What if that is like their lower end budget for advertising? Maybe they've already stuck their money, right? Like at this point, like children are going to be brought there by older people. No matter
Yeah, but you got, I guess, new children coming up that haven't seen it yet.
It's decent
sell
selling.
McDonald's. I mean,
They could probably cut their advertising budget and they still do good. Just by word of mouth.
But they're one of those that believes, and if you've taken an advertising class or whatever, it's that keeping that name in front of you so that you're thinking about it. Because it's not all like informational. It's more like just keeping that name out there so that you know the McDonald's brand. And you can't knock their success. They've had incredible success, but I just found that all 969, that's just short of $1 billion a year that they spend in advertising. And then 2,600,000 a day. That's a lot of money. Now, I was back in the 80s and 90s when I was in the business, they were spending $1 million a week. And now it's spending more than that, $2.5 million a day. So they get the word out. All right, so two basic tools: franchise fee, royalty rate. A variety of factors influence it, and you don't want to charge too much because you're going to exclude some people, but you also don't want to leave any money on the table. You got to try to figure out what's the optimum range that we can put this in that you can attract people, they can make money, but yet you can make money also. All right, so that's it for today. Don't forget your paper, double space, 2 to 3 pages. First part's the legal side, and then the second part is just the relationship with the franchisor, and the franchisee's relationship with the franchisor.
already, I interviewed our franchisee.
Oh, cool.
He didn't know that much. Probably not surprising to you, but as far as
Well, hopefully what he said is
like go back through all the PowerPoints and just take those out. The area protection in it, that they give for certain people to people that are underage, but it is a fair amount of heat, but like, oh, well, we didn't necessarily sign a contract.
you buy or you just, wait, okay.
He's like, we didn't necessarily sign a contract for X amount of years. It's just, if we keep doing well, it's very big.
This guy's a franchisee? Yeah, definitely, I would look up. You need to do somebody. Go to Barbaritos or Mario's Pizza. You know what that is, Mario's? Sports. Well, Marco's the owner, doesn't work in it. Mario's is up by Sports Authority at Capitol Circle and 319. The guy's name is Michael Holmes. And he's in there every day. Or the Firehouse guys. They're in all the time. Yeah. All right. All right.
I know the guy from Nintendo.
Yeah.
He sold it to the corporation. Is that okay?
I mean, as long as it was, yeah, maybe even. Okay, well, maybe as long as, and talk about that. Will he tell you why he did it?
Okay.
Why he sold?
Okay, so that's okay now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Just to be clear, how much doing on this financial brokerage?
Okay.
And you said the legal aspect, would you just mean, what do you mean, protection rate, or what is that?
No, the franchise fee, royalty rate, just all the stuff that's
all
in that
exactly
FDD.
legal.
Right.
Okay, cool. All right.
It's contractual. What's their advertising? How much do they pay a month for advertising?
All right, appreciate it.
Okay. All that stuff we covered. All right, I got you.
Robertson? I did not. All right.